Good morning. Welcome back to Morning at NTV. My name is Malaki Vilodera. Now, on the solution segment, you're taking over that conversation that Andrew Chamagero had with ex-Crane Bank employees. And of course, a few weeks back, we actually saw the BOU, the Bank of Uganda, beginning investigations into how, DFCU actually laid off Crane Bank employees. And so that was a push and actually a move after this particular, kind of employees actually wrote to the BOU and DFCU saying that they demand a 48 billion shillings payoff. And this was through a letter dated the 23rd of October 2018. And of course, this letter was received by the communications director of the Bank of Uganda. And in that letter, actually that letter also served as a notice that, these employees would sue both DFCU Bank and the Bank of Uganda. And they said that they will do that if this money is not remitted within 45 days. And if I do my math right, that means by that they actually expect this money latest by around 7th to 8th of December this particular year. So in studios to talk about that and just to forge solutions to this particular crisis is Mr. Isaac Semakade. He is a public law and humanity rights lawyer. He's also the lead counsel for the ex-employees of Crane Bank Limited. Thank you so much for making time.
Pleasure.
Next to him, I'm joined by Mr. Douglas Opio. He is the Executive Director of the Federation of Uganda Employers, the voice of employers. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now,
Pleasure.
Let's start with that conversation, Mr. Semakade. Of course, this is not the first time we're seeing, the ex-Crane Bank employees come out to cry foul. This actually started last year, and let's take a look before we actually continue. Let's take a look.
In the first 6 months after taking over Crane Bank, it declared approximately 60 billion profits from Crane Bank alone. If we had unqualified people who are unskilled, then all that would have not been achieved. Secondly, we have our papers. I personally, I hold a bachelor's degree, the postgraduate diploma in HR, master's in HR, and I was terminated. I was heading the HR department with my team of 3 members. Go and inquire from Bank of Uganda audit. HR had only 3 issues. Those 3 issues entirely were for the board, not as HR department.
Act. You look at 81, where is collective termination, where it is supposed to, they were supposed to have told the workers' union and also about it, supposed to end in our names. It shouldn't have been so immediately. But we were terminated just after, even before.
We actually saw you there, Mr. Semakade. So someone would ask, this was last year. So why has it taken so long? Because last year, the same issue was hitting headlines. You went silent, and now you're back again. Why has it taken so long to get justice?
Thank you, Mala, and good morning, viewers. The short answer is that we had to conduct extensive fact investigation before bringing a case on behalf of a class. The public would be interested to learn that the class action technique is not frequently used in Uganda. You have 10 people that approached the court and affirmed on oath that they will take due care to protect not only their rights, but the rights of so many fellow workers who will be absent from the proceedings. So the burden of due diligence on those class representatives and their class counsel is significant. It is the reason why we have been deliberately slow in gathering the necessary facts so that when we table the suit, we have left no stone unturned.
No stone unturned, indeed.
Yes.
And last week, we actually saw you approaching the Speaker of Parliament, Madam Rebecca Kadaga, and you asked her to also push the same issue to COSASE for further investigations as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We've been gifted by an accident of history, a rare accident of history, because 7 banks have gone through this sort of transition, a forced takeover by the regulator, and in 6 of those instances, there was no public review. So the Crane Bank scenario is the first of its kind, where Parliament said, no, we will put our foot down. We need to scrutinize how the Bank of Uganda conducts these processes, because it appears there are so many victims whose voices don't get heard appropriately. These things move so fast. Shareholders get railroaded, and as we have seen in this very case, nearly 400 workers have their livelihoods affected without a second chance. So we went to thank Parliament for taking this bold and historic step. We went to thank the Honorable Speaker specifically for standing firm, because there were several attempts by officials in BOU and DFCU to block this parliamentary inquiry using legal gymnastics. But she ruled in favor of the inquiry going forward. She lent all the resources of Parliament to the Auditor General, who brought up this report. And so the report of the Auditor General that was released in August has stunning revelations, which we felt that we needed to amplify insofar as they touch on workers' rights.
Okay. Mr. Douglas Opio,
Yes.
is DFCU Bank a member of the Federation of Uganda Employers?
Yes.
Did what they did, is it right?
I can't really comment whether it's right or wrong, because I don't have the facts at hand. But ordinarily, employers generally have challenges in 2 areas, especially when they're doing termination. One is the procedure. Secondly is the issue of facts. So in these 2 instances, I need to have the right information in order for me to be able to comment on this particular case. It's unfortunate, but I can't comment on this individual case.
You cannot comment on it. But it's an issue that we've been seeing since last year, and I'm sure you read the papers, you watch the news. Does the Federation of Uganda Employers only look after, you know, the employers and not the employees?
I think we look at both. It's actually impossible to take care of the employer without necessarily looking at the interests of the worker. The worker helps the employer to achieve his objectives. So for us as a federation, if we want to help the employer achieve his objectives, then we have got to help them on our best to work with the workers.
Okay, all right. Let me not hammer you so much, because someone would ask, this is a story that we've been seeing since last year, then how come you didn't take notice of it and you didn't actually, you know, follow through with this particular matter with a member of the FUE being DFCU?
This particular case needed investigations because it involves documents that are ordinarily not public documents. And these investigations, as you have heard also from the lawyer, has been ongoing. So to be able to conclusively advise an employer, then it's important to have these facts at hand.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you actually pledged to follow it up?
Absolutely.
All
We are
right.
engaging with the DFCO over this particular case.
Mr. Samakade, most of them, of course, Andrew Chamagero was having a conversation with them, and most of them say that the process of termination is what they are totally against.
Yes.
It's not the termination, but the process of termination.
Yes.
So just bring us to light, with regards to the law of the land, what ideally should have happened?
So from this, in this case, if it unfolds in a public forum like a court of law, or probably the public hearing we're going to get at Kosase, Ugandans will be encouraged to learn the obligations imposed on an employer in what we call a merger and acquisition scenario. In such a scenario where one organization is acquiring the business of another organization, the law has guaranteed continuity of service for the workers in the transferred business. That one is an ironclad guarantee written in the law, section 28 of the Employment Act of 2006. a transfer of business from one employer to another will not affect the continuity of employment for the existing employees in the transferred entity. Now, we learned from the Auditor General's report that Bank of Uganda and DFCU Bank tried to reach an agreement that is contrary in both its letter and spirit to this ironclad guarantee given to all workers of Uganda by Section 28 of the Employment Act. So that clause, which the Auditor General has talked about on page 47 of his report, that Bank of Uganda promised to reimburse DFCU for any terminal benefits and dues payable to any employee that was terminated, any employee of Crane Bank that was terminated by DFCU in their first 2 months. And that's what DFCU did. It received the employees on the 25th of January, and by the 24th of February, it had laid off 300 Crane Bank employees. On the 17th of March, it laid off another 100, and so forth. So that by 24th of March, the 2 months deadline, it had 400 people. It had laid off selectively by really looking at which side of the business they came from. Were you within our existing business, or you were from the transferred business? That is classic discrimination. There was no fair selection criteria for which workers to lay off. There was a breach of the equality principle. You see, once DFCU acquired the Crane Bank employees, they became part of the DFCU family, and they should have been treated equally. If there was any reason for laying off the workers, for instance, to downsize the business, to rationalize the HR setup, the workforce, then the measures adopted by DFCU should have cut across the board.
Right.
You don't just pick and say, former Crane Bank workers, you are ineligible to stay. You don't pass my test. What test? So that is the first really criterion that was violated. The second thing which I would really want to express is this: when DFCU wanted to buy Crane Bank, it was given a chance by the Bank of Uganda to do what they call due diligence.
Right.
Now, in its due diligence, it knew how many employees Crane Bank had and how many employees it would have to acquire by virtue of Section 28 of the Employment Act. It also knew its existing HR setup, how many employees it had. It also knew how it would merge these businesses, or it should have known. And from the consultants we've consulted, they tell us that in a typical scenario like that, DFCU should have generated a new model that will work after the transition.
Right, and assimilate all these employees.
Yes, and then, maybe not all, it probably couldn't take all.
Yes.
But in the new model, it would be clear to all, both the pre-existing employees and those from the transferred business, that some of you will have to go, and this is the structure. This is how you're going to compete for the remaining jobs.
Yeah.
So that everybody would have competed for jobs in the new structure.
Fairly and squarely. All right, I do have questions for you, and these are questions coming from the ex-Crane Bank employees, and they're actually with Andrew Chamagero. So, Andrew Chamagero, feel free to shoot.
Well, thank you so much, Mala. We're still here with, of course, former employees of Crane Bank Limited, and they still have a couple of questions to ask. If I may start with, I'll start with the gentleman here, Mwanje, who has questions.
Yes, my question goes directly to Mr. Opio Douglas. In the report of the Auditor General, it was very clear that there were irregularities.
Yes.
During the takeover of Crane Bank Limited. The same irregularities that we've been complaining about, the same irregularities that our lawyer Semakade pointed out. So, Mr. Opio Douglas, do you dispute the Auditor General's report? That's my question.
That's your question. Let's have another question from her.
Mr. Opio, mine is not really such of a question, but I'm asking you, imagine if you were the branch manager of former Crane Bank, and then in DFCU, you made to organize lines, as in tell customers, stand here, please follow this school like that. What would have been your reaction? Okay,
last one there.
Thank you very much. My question goes directly to Mr. Opio, the Executive Director of Uganda Federation of Employers. Mr. Opio, with due respect to you, does the Uganda Federation of Employers promote the rule of law in this country? Then, looking at the Constitution or the Employment Act in particular, 2006, the termination law and the organizational taking over the services of the other, do you really agree that DFCU followed those specific laws of the Employment Act?
All right. Well, there you have it. Mr. Douglas Opio is going to be responding to this. And who happens to be on the desk is the lawyer, the one who is representing the employers of the former Crane Bank Limited. Mala?
To start with whichever question that is comfortable with you.
Okay. Thank you so much, colleagues who have asked me these questions. I didn't note your name, so I will not respond in any particular order. I also feel your pain. I feel your anguish. It's as much painful if I were to lose a job. But I also want to, before I go into the specifics, to give a general comment. The protection of an employer is just as important as the protection of the employee. The situation could perhaps be much worse if DFCU were to close because of this. Much more employees will be affected. So it's important for us to seek a middle ground rather than trying to pull DFCU down. If there is a mistake that has been made, this mistake we have the opportunity to correct, and one of the ways to correct it is through mediation. Now that's very important, that jobs need to be preserved, businesses need to continue. DFCU performs a huge role in this economy through the taxes it pays, through the people it employs, so it contributes to the overall economic good. So that's one thing that we should, as much as possible, even when we are unhappy with what has happened, seek to protect the employer.
Okay.
Now I go to the specifics. You ask me a question, do I dispute the Auditor General report? Of course not. But then the Auditor General's report provides one aspect of the matter under consideration. There are several other dimensions which have not specifically been addressed in this report. So we cannot use a part to decide on the whole. Now, secondly, if I were the employee affected by this, my sister is asking this question, of course, definitely I would be unhappy. No one wants to be laid off. It's our natural feeling that we should all continue to work. But it may not necessarily be possible at all times. There are situations when we could be laid off because the ability of the employer to continue to employ everyone might be affected. So even when we don't like it, that could happen to us. The third question is, do we as the Federation of Uganda Employers promote the rule of law? We do, quite extensively. Labor law compliance is actually one of our core responsibilities. And that, for some of you who read in the New Vision, I write about this every day. Every single Monday you can read what I write. I guide employers. Not about a month or so, I wrote about why employers lose cases at the industrial court. Why I pointed out that nearly over 90% of the cases that go to the industrial court are lost by employers. And this is because they don't follow the right process. They are faulted mainly on two things. One, they don't follow the right procedure. Then secondly, they terminate without clear facts.
Right.
So the substance is basically not there.
So in your view, how best would BOU and DFCU Bank handle this particular process and transition, especially with regards to laying off, this particular employees that they felt would not add any value to DFCU Bank, just to be able to strike a balance in terms of them to avert the risk and also not to end up, affecting the lives of these people, because clearly, based on the responses that we're getting, they were totally affected. They were not prepared. They didn't have notices. I mean, financially, these are breadwinners. So how best would the two entities have handled this particular transition?
Now, this is not just for this particular case, but for all employers out there to be aware. The first situation, when you envisage that you foresee a termination or you foresee dismissal of workers, the first thing that you have got to do is to notify them. So you provide a notice to these employees, informing them of the impending action you're bound to take. Once that has been done, then you go into a process which ordinarily would be called investigations. What are those issues or the preparations? In that process, if it was a misconduct, if it was a particular issue the employer is not happy with, perhaps some workers could even be suspended. They may not be suspended. They may continue working. So you have a period when you are doing your investigations. For the DFCU particular case, you have an opportunity to do an analysis of the work environment and see whether it's actually profitable to continue with all these employees.
Okay.
So that period would then follow. They would do an analysis. For another employer, they would do these investigations for a different purpose. Once this investigation is complete and a report is available, then you call the affected employees for a hearing. So once these employees are called for a hearing, you actually give them the opportunity to come with the colleagues or other people whom they might want to sit in this meeting with them.
And is it important also for the employer to just prepare, the employees that are going to be laid off, to prepare them psychologically for, the move forward and the future, out of employment? Is it important?
Extremely important. And like I'm saying, once the employee is called for this hearing, then you can have extensive discussions surrounding this. That's where you'll put it to the employee that we are no longer in a position to employ you for this and this reason. And this is how we propose to compensate you in this process. So you discuss the compensation arrangement, what is due to the employee. It could be leave untaken, it could be some of their pays within your arrangement, if they have a pension within the organization, all those things then would be discussed. And then you agree, counseling, preparing somebody for that particular termination, just like you'd prepare workers for retirement. It's the same thing when workers are getting terminated, because the psychological impact is quite serious.
All right. Mr. Semakade, just let us in as we come to a close. What are we supposed to expect in the coming days now that the matter is not just in court, but also COSASA is taking it up? BOU has already started investigations into the entire matter. Mr. Douglas Opio now has proposed that you people need to rethink and maybe consider arbitration, mediation and stuff like that. So what should we be expecting in the coming days?
Thank you, Mara. Let me first make one thing clear. There is no court case yet. So the only court process that has happened is the seeking of permission to certify a class of affected workers who shall be represented by designated class leaders and class counsel. We will be going back to court sometime this week to seek further permission to include BOU in the proposed suit. But then again, the suit, like you said in the beginning, will come sometime in December, shortly before Christmas, if these efforts don't yield fruit. But for the immediate foreseeable future, we expect the workers to be invited to the public hearing that is ongoing at Parliament, so that they can amplify the they applied in the context of the Auditor General's report and what it revealed. Particularly, what we should look out for is whether Parliament will give the ex-Crane Bank employees an opportunity to scrutinize and comment upon what the Auditor General has called the schedules of terminal benefits that BOU says it paid. BOU has claimed from the Ugandan taxpayer a bill of 5,117,000,000 as reimbursement for the proceeds, for the monies it gave former Crane Bank workers. The former Crane Bank workers say by their calculation they received peanuts and they can't make $1 billion. So somebody is going to be caught in a lie and heads are going to roll.
Okay. Is mediation an option as we come to a close, yes or no?
Yes.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much for coming in studios, Mr. Isaac Semakade. He is the lead counsel for the ex-employees of Crane Bank Limited. Thank you so much for making time. Mr. Douglas Opio, Executive Director of the Federation of Uganda Employers, the voice of employers. Thank you so much for making time and for the pledge that you will actually take this matter.
I'll definitely engage with DFC on this matter.
All right. Thank you so much. That has been the Conversation on Solutions segment. Morning Attentive still continues. Up next is Take Note with Flavia Tumusime. Keep it here.